Welcome back to the Gridiron Guys, and today we are going to do our second player spotlight, and that is going to be on Marvin Jones. The first was on Brandon Ayuk. If you haven't already watched that, I recommend go to checking it out, and then coming back to this video. But Marvin Jones is another player that I think is going so late in drafts. It blows my mind, and I think he could be a really, really good value with an ADP of around 80 to 90, depending on your of half PPR or full PPR. He's being drafted as a bench player, and I'm projecting him to finish as a high-end wide receiver 2 for the year. And that sounds crazy, but it's actually very realistic. So let's get into the stats. First, let's break down his physical attributes. And he's an underrated athlete. And a lot of people actually, are scared to draft players once they hit 30 because that's generally seen as a drop-off for running back and wide receivers. And Marvin Jones just turned 30. But he ran a 4.46 out of college. He has a 76th percentile speed score, 84th percentile agility score, and 75% catch radius. He's 6'2". From a physical standpoint, I have no concerns with Marvin Jones. He's always been a red zone guy. He is a deep threat, and I don't think he's going to slow down this year. I think he's going to have a terrific season. I think everything is set up perfectly for him. One stat that stood out to me for Marvin last year is he had the 14th best reception percentage. And that means is from his total targets to how many of those passes he caught, that is his reception percentage. And his reception percentage was 68.1%, which was 14th best in the NFL. And that is a guy who's a deep threat. He's not catching little slants, 3-yard routes like Julian Edelman or Cooper Kupp would. I mean, that's very impressive for a guy who also played a decent amount of games with David Blau and Jeff Driscoll. To put it in perspective, Kenny Golladay had a reception percentage of 56%. The Lions slot receiver, Danny Amendola, catching far shorter targets, had 63.9%, when Marvin Jones had a 68.1% reception percentage, which is very good. So his play is showing no decline in efficiency, which is very encouraging for an older player. And I mean, last year, on a per-game basis, Marvin Jones was very good. If you put his stats for 16 games, he's finishing as the wide receiver 11. He missed 3 games, though, and he finished as the wide receiver 27. And that is not a bad value because he played very well last year, catching 62 balls for almost 800 yards and 9 touchdowns. And you may say, 9 touchdowns, 13 games, that's a lot. But I mean, Marvin Jones is a guy who's found the end zone consistently throughout his career. And I think he's capable of putting up double-digit touchdowns next year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does. I mean, Stafford was playing exceptional last year until he got injured, on pace for 30-plus touchdowns. The Lions are a pass-first team. It only helps Marvin Jones that Kenny Golladay finally showed he's an elite wide receiver 1, so that Marvin Jones will be drawing that number 2 corner every single week. And he's going to be beating those number 2 corners every single week. He is far better. He can be a wide receiver 1, but he is being played as a wide receiver 2 in the Lions system, and that is dramatically helping his production and his efficiency because he's not going to see more targets than Golladay. He's just not better than Golladay is. But he's going to dominate that second corner, and it's shown with that 14th best reception percentage in the league. He's not going to slow down at 30, and he had a great season last year, so why are we sleeping on him? I don't understand. I think the emergence of Kenny Golladay is just putting a shadow over how good Marvin Jones is. If he plays a full 16 games, I expect him to be a high-end wide receiver 2, anywhere from wide receiver 12 to, I would say, 17, 18. I mean, this guy last year, with backup QBs for part of the year, was on pace to be wide receiver 11 if he didn't miss those 3 games at the end of the year. Wide receiver 11. That is a wide receiver 1. And right now, he is being drafted in the 8th, maybe even 9th round sometimes. But he has potential to finish as a wide receiver 1 for the year. Is it likely? No. Can it happen? Yes, it can. Is he likely going to be a wide receiver 2? If he plays a full 16, I would say almost definitely. I mean, he has missed a few games over the last 2 years, but I looked at his career injury history, and in 7 years, missing a total of 16 games, about 2 to 3 a year. It's not that high, especially considering last year he missed 3 total games. 3 games. And he finished as the wide receiver 27, which is almost a wide receiver 2 for the year and a very strong flex play. And I understand you don't want that injury risk. He may have a tiny injury risk, but this is a guy you're drafting as a bench player. When he's in your lineup, he is a high-end, high-quality start. And he should be a high-quality start regardless of who he's playing, because he's not going to be getting that number one corner matchup. And there's not a lot of teams you can say they can take out a second corner to cover some of the elite wide receiver 2s like Marvin Jones. I mean, this is nothing more than he's a great player. He's going to continue to be a great player. Matthew Stafford, I believe, is going to have one of his career years next year behind a Lions team that should have a really good passing offense. And the ADP does not match that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. ADP of 80 to 90, it just doesn't make sense. Kenny Golladay, I don't think he's being overdrafted. I expect him to be just as dominant as what he was last year. But Marvin Jones was almost pacing him on a 16-game pace, and one is a second-round pick, and one is an eighth-round pick. Doesn't make sense. And maybe the ADP catches up with him, but I don't think it is, because sometimes as fantasy owners, the community just chooses to neglect these older, Mr. Reliable, safe picks. They want to find the breakouts in Hollywood Brown and Cam Akers, in Tyler Higbee. But guys like Marvin Jones are going to get done for you on a weekly basis. And I'm going to say, this is my hot take, if Stafford plays a full 16 games, Marvin Jones finishes as a top 15 wide receiver for the year, top 15 wide receiver. People don't understand how good of a season Stafford was having last year. In 8 games, Stafford was on pace. Well, he had 19 touchdowns and 2,499 yards, which is on pace for 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. If Stafford throws for anything near what he's set to throw for last year, Jones will have around 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns, which will definitely finish him as a top 15 wide receiver. So stop sleeping on Marvin Jones. He is a steal of a draft pick. In the 8th and 9th round. I would take him around the likes of Jarvis Landry and Michael Gallup, Marquise Brown, which are 2 rounds before. But there's no need to, because no one's drafting him that high. You can sit back, draft your running backs early, which I strongly encourage. That's why the strategy is so successful, because you can get guys like Marvin Jones. And Marvin Jones is the guy that I will be drafting on every single team that I own, because he will be a league winner being drafted as a bench player, which will finish as a wide receiver 2. And I'm going to be continuing to do these player spotlights over the next few weeks. I think there's a lot of guys right now who have ADPs that don't reflect how impactful they could be on your fantasy roster. And I'm going to be getting into one each week until the end of August, and expect some rankings. I have to finish my rankings for my top 150 big board, and I'm going to be putting out my top 10 wide receivers and tight end videos in the near future too. So make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below at what wide receiver ranking you think Marvin Jones will finish at for the year. Let me know down in the comment section below.